Ethan's ship groaned in the silence of space, the lights flickering as he drifted, barely scraping the edge of his next breath. He stared at the console, hands hovering over lifeless buttons, scanning for any last flicker of life on his vessel. Somewhere, far off, a signal blinked, faint, like a distant heartbeat. A distress signal, he muttered to himself, hardly believing it. Yet there it was, a faint pulsing light on his radar, as if a cosmic lighthouse were calling him to safety. He hesitated, watching it blink at the edge of his scope. Every instinct told him that this wasn't a haven, it was a trap. But with oxygen levels falling and his ship drifting dead in space, he was out of choices. He muttered under his breath as he punched the coordinates into the system, trying to ignore the uneasy chill that settled over him. If this is the end, at least it'll be less lonely. The ship whirred to life, barely holding as it nudged in the direction of the signal. His hands gripped the steering controls, fingers tight, knuckles pale against the dim glow of the console. Silence weighed heavy in the cabin, punctuated only by the strained hum of the failing engines. The asteroid loomed ahead, a jagged black behemoth turning slowly in the shadows, cast in a faint crimson from the distant light of a dying star. As he neared, he noticed faint structures on its surface, like ruins abandoned centuries ago. His breath caught. He hadn't expected to find civilization. Ethan activated his communicator, hoping for any sign of life. "This is Captain Ethan Hale, requesting permission to land. If anyone can hear me, I need assistance." Static crackled back, filling the silence with emptiness. He squinted at the radar. There was movement, a figure shifting near a makeshift landing pad on the asteroid's surface. Someone was there. Ethan prepared himself, grabbing his helmet and slipping it on with care. He punched a button, and the ship lurched toward a landing sequence, stuttering as its failing systems fought gravity. He winced as he felt the ship's rough, shaky landing. Exhaling, he stepped to the airlock, feeling a strange pull, an almost instinctual urge to proceed, even as unease prickled at the back of his mind. As he emerged, the silence deepened, and his boots hit the cold rock with a dull thud. The asteroid's surface was eerily quiet, the distant starlight casting strange shadows along jagged rocks and ancient pillars. Ruins stretched out in all directions, barely discernible against the dark. And there, at the edge of the landing pad, stood a figure cloaked in shadows. He squinted, and his stomach tightened. She stood unmoving, watching him from beneath a dark hood, her posture impossibly still. He stepped forward cautiously, his hand near his sidearm. "Are you the one who sent the signal?" he called, trying to keep his voice steady. Slowly, she stepped into the faint starlight, her face partially visible. Her skin was pale, almost luminous in the darkness, and her eyes gleamed, dark and magnetic, pulling him in with an unnatural intensity. "You're human?" she asked, voice soft and low, each word like a silken thread. Ethan nodded, swallowing hard as he felt the weight of her gaze settle over him. "Yes, and you?" She tilted her head slightly, a faint, almost amused smile touching her lips. "I'm Solara." The words seemed to resonate with an unspoken meaning, a name that hung in the air like a whispered secret. He nodded slowly, but his hand remained on his weapon. "What is this place? Why are you here?" "Lost souls find their way here," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Or perhaps they're drawn here." Her gaze lingered on him, studying, as if weighing his worth. "But tell me, human, do you believe in curses?" Ethan's brow furrowed and he shook his head. "Curses? I don't have time for fairy tales." "Don't you?" Her voice was calm, almost playful. She stepped closer, and he felt the air grow heavier, a coldness seeping through his skin. "We are in the space between stars, where myths hold more truth than reality. If you doubt that, then why did you follow the signal?" He opened his mouth, then hesitated, finding himself unable to answer. In truth, he didn't know why he'd come. The signal had felt like a call meant for him alone. Solara continued, her eyes narrowing as she studied him, You're a curious one, aren't you? But curiosity often carries a price. And what price am I expected to pay? He asked, his voice barely concealing his growing tension. She let out a soft laugh, dark and musical, and he could have sworn the shadows themselves seemed to shift around her. That remains to be seen. He felt his heart pounding, but he fought to keep his composure. Look, if you don't intend to help me, then I'll leave. I have my own problems. Leave? Her gaze turned sharp, her smile fading. I'm afraid you won't be leaving anytime soon, Ethan. He froze, the sound of his name sending a chill down his spine. How do you know my name? Solara stepped closer, and he felt the ground shift beneath him, as if her presence alone altered the space around them. I know many things about you, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. You came here not by chance, but because I called you. Ethan's hand gripped his weapon tightly. Called me? I don't even know you. But you will, she replied, her voice laced with a dark promise. We're bound, you and I, by fate, or something darker. He took a step back, but her gaze held him captive, drawing him back in. Her eyes shimmered in the low light, and he noticed a faint hunger lurking beneath her calm expression. Bound? He echoed, feeling as if the word itself were a trap. Yes, she said softly, her voice a low hum that resonated in the empty space around them. Bound by a curse older than you can imagine. And you are the key to breaking it. Ethan's hand loosened on his weapon, caught between the pull of her words and the rising urge to flee. And if I refuse? Her smile was cold, a flash of sharp teeth that sent a shiver through him. There is no refusal, Ethan. You've already stepped into my world. He stared at her, the weight of her words pressing down on him like the pull of a black hole. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but something deeper kept him rooted to the spot, unable to tear his gaze from hers. What do you want from me? He whispered. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming, as if she were absorbing the very space around him. Help me break these chains, and I will show you secrets that lie beyond the stars. But be warned, the path is not without sacrifice. He swallowed, his pulse pounding in his ears. Part of him wanted to turn and run, to escape the strange magnetic force she exuded, but another part, deeper, irrational, felt drawn to her, captivated by the promise of danger and darkness lurking in her words. What choice do I have? He asked quietly, more to himself than to her. She leaned in, her eyes piercing, almost triumphant. None at all. Ethan's heartbeat echoed louder than the faint hum of the asteroid's atmosphere. Solara's gaze held him captive, her eyes glimmering with an unnatural hunger that sent a chill through his veins. Why me? He asked, his voice barely steady. What makes me the key to your freedom? Solara's lips curled into a faint, almost sad smile, as if she'd been asked this question 1,000 times before. Because, Ethan, you're alive. You're still untouched by the curse that binds this place. Unlike the others who came before you, you possess warmth. Her fingers reached forward, ghosting just above his chest, as if she could feel his heart beating from a distance. He fought the urge to pull back. And what exactly does that mean for me? It means you're not like the lost souls scattered here, the ones who were not strong enough to break free. Their spirits haunt these ruins, too weak to resist the curse, but strong enough to linger. Her voice softened, laced with something like regret. But you have a spark they lacked. You can open the gateway that binds me. Ethan shifted uneasily, glancing around at the desolate landscape. Shadows seemed to cling to every stone, whispering with a darkness that was hard to shake. He swallowed, feeling the weight of her words press down on him. And if I don't help you, what happens then? Then I remain trapped. And you? She tilted her head, a hint of sorrow flickering across her face. You will eventually succumb to the void, just as the others have. You'll wander this place until your spirit fades, slowly becoming one of the many lost souls here. She paused, letting the silence stretch before she whispered, "It is not a kind fate, Ethan." The bleakness of her words seeped into him, filling him with a gnawing dread. Yet something in her tone, a faint, pleading note beneath the confidence, spurred him on. Despite the danger, despite the fear, he felt an urge to know more, to unravel the secrets she held so tightly. "All right," he said finally, his voice barely louder than a breath. "Let's say I believe you. How do I know you're telling me the truth? How do I know this isn't some elaborate trap?" Solara's eyes softened, and for the first time he saw a glimpse of vulnerability in their dark depths. "I do not blame you for your doubt," she murmured, her voice quieter, almost pained. "But tell me, Ethan, if you had been trapped here for centuries, surrounded by silence, watching stars come and go without end, wouldn't you want to be freed? Even if it meant asking a stranger for help?" He studied her, noticing the faint tremble in her fingers, the way her gaze shifted when she spoke of her imprisonment. She looked like someone burdened by an eternity of solitude, cursed to wait endlessly in the cold void. Taking a deep breath, he made his choice. "If I'm going to help you, I need to know everything. No more secrets, no more cryptic warnings." A shadow flickered across her face, and she nodded slowly, as though bracing herself. "Very well, human. Follow me." She led him away from the landing pad, her movements almost weightless as they wound through the ruins. The twisted, crumbling stones seemed to watch them as they passed, etched with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim starlight. Ethan's eyes lingered on one of the markings, drawn to its eerie glow. "Those symbols," he said, nodding toward the carvings. "What do they mean?" "They are fragments of the curse that binds this place," she replied softly, tracing her fingertips along the nearest stone. "In my people's language, they spell out the terms of my exile, a reminder of the betrayal that led me here." Her voice held a strange sadness, and for a moment, Ethan glimpsed the weight of her past. "Betrayal?" he echoed, his curiosity piqued. "Yes," she murmured, barely audible. "Once I was revered among my people, but my refusal to obey a sacred law brought ruin upon me. They deemed me a danger, something to be contained, and so they cast me here, bound by symbols that ensure I can never return." Ethan studied her, piecing together the fragments of her story. "And now you need my help to break those symbols?" She glanced at him, her dark eyes shining. "Yes, the markings are attuned to life force. They require energy, something I can no longer generate alone. But with yours—" He nodded slowly, piecing it together. "With mine, you can weaken them enough to escape." "Precisely." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "But be warned, Ethan. Once you give of yourself, there is no undoing it. The curse will claim a part of you, just as it has taken from me." The warning hung heavy in the air, and he felt a prickling at the back of his mind, as if some unseen force were already pulling at him. "And what happens to me after?" "That depends on your strength." Her gaze lingered on him, searching as if she could see the threads of his fate unraveling before her. "If you're strong enough, you may resist the worst of it. But if you're not—" She trailed off, her expression darkening. He swallowed, trying to ignore the creeping dread. "I don't suppose there's any other way." A faint smile touched her lips, but it was laced with sorrow. "If there were, I would not ask this of you." They came to a halt before a massive stone door, inscribed with more of the strange symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the darkness. Solara raised a hand, her fingers tracing one of the symbols, and the air around them grew cold, as if a silent power had awakened within the walls. "This is the first seal," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Place your hand here, and let your energy flow." He hesitated, feeling the weight of her gaze on him. What will it feel like?" "Like a part of you is slipping away," she replied, her tone steady, yet tinged with a faint regret. "But remember, it is only the beginning. Once the first seal is broken, there will be more." More? He echoed, frowning. She nodded. 3 in total. Each will demand a deeper sacrifice, but with each one broken, my strength and my freedom will grow. He clenched his jaw, his hand hovering just above the symbol. A voice in the back of his mind screamed at him to stop, to turn and run before he committed to this. But another voice, one deeper and more primal, urged him onward, drawn to the strange woman and her haunting words. Taking a deep breath, he pressed his hand against the stone. Instantly, a searing cold shot through him, as if the life were being siphoned from his veins. He gritted his teeth, fighting the urge to pull away, feeling the curse's dark tendrils wrap around him, pulling him into its depths. Solara watched him, her face a mask of calm, though he caught a flicker of sorrow in her eyes. "Hold on," she murmured, her voice soft but commanding. "It will pass." The pain ebbed slowly, replaced by an eerie numbness, as though he'd lost a part of himself he'd never get back. He pulled his hand away, staring down at his palm, which felt strangely hollow. What did it take?" he whispered, his voice barely steady. "Your vitality," she replied, her tone gentle yet firm. "The seal consumes a part of your essence, binding it to the curse. But now—" She placed her own hand against the symbol, and it glowed with a faint, eerie light before shattering into fragments, disappearing into the air like embers. The first seal was broken. Ethan staggered back, feeling his strength ebb, but Solara reached out, her cool hand steadying him. "You did well, Ethan," she murmured, "but the journey has only just begun." He met her gaze, the intensity of her stare sending a shiver down his spine. There was a hunger there, a fierce, insatiable yearning, but it was tempered by a strange softness, as though a part of her feared what lay ahead. "What now?" he asked, voice tinged with exhaustion. "Now," she said, stepping closer, her presence overwhelming. "We move forward. The next seal awaits." He felt her fingers linger on his arm, her touch cold, yet strangely comforting. And he realized with a start that he wasn't just helping her escape. He was becoming entwined with her fate, bound by a curse older and darker than he could fathom. And as he followed her into the depths of the ruins, he wondered if he would ever truly be free of her, or if he even wanted to be. The dark cavern seemed to stretch endlessly before them, echoing with whispers that tugged at Ethan's mind. The final seal was close. He could feel it pulsing, a heartbeat deep within the stone walls. Beside him, Solara moved with purpose, her movements more confident, her strength visibly renewed. Yet, an eerie stillness clung to her, as if she bore the weight of a truth she dared not share. Ethan glanced at her, sensing the storm beneath her calm exterior. "Solara, we're almost there. But you've yet to tell me everything, haven't you?" She stopped, her back to him, the silence drawing tight around them. For a long moment she said nothing, her gaze fixed on the shadows ahead. Finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "You are right, Ethan. There is one last thing you deserve to know. A truth I have kept hidden." He crossed his arms, wary but resolute. "I'm listening." Solara turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "When the last seal is broken, I will be freed, yes. But the curse, it requires more than just these stones to release me. The energy it took to bind me here is ancient, powerful. To counter it, the final seal demands an equal offering." Ethan's heart clenched. An offering? What kind of offering? Her eyes softened, regret mingling with something else, something that tugged painfully at his own heart. "A life, Ethan. Yours. Or mine." The air left his lungs, replaced by a bitter cold. "So, you brought me here to die?" "No." She shook her head vehemently, stepping closer, the urgency in her gaze piercing through his anger. "I had hoped that, by some miracle, we could find another way. But the curse is ancient and unyielding. It will not release me unless I sacrifice, or unless you do." He swallowed, the weight of her words sinking in. "And if I choose not to, what happens then?" then I remain bound. And you. She trailed off, sadness dimming the fierce light in her eyes. You will be trapped here, just as I have been. The curse won't let you leave either. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. There has to be another way, he muttered, more to himself than to her. But deep down, he knew there wasn't. Every step, every breath had led him here, bound inescapably to this fate. Solara's hand touched his shoulder, grounding him. You don't have to do this, Ethan, she said softly. I wouldn't blame you if you chose to save yourself. I have lived in darkness for centuries. A little longer makes no difference. He met her gaze, searching for deception, for something that would make this choice easier. But there was only sorrow there, and a kind of reluctant acceptance. In that moment, Ethan realized the depth of her loneliness, the unyielding despair of an eternity spent waiting. A voice, deep and resolute, rose within him. No, he said, his voice steady. If anyone deserves freedom, it's you. I came here of my own choice, and I don't know why, but I believe you're worth it. Solara's eyes widened, her composure cracking, and for a fleeting moment, he saw the woman beneath the curse, the woman who'd once been proud and fierce, reduced to a ghost by forces beyond her control. She reached out, her hand trembling, her fingertips brushing his cheek. Ethan, I never thought anyone would. He placed his hand over hers, feeling the coolness of her skin against his warmth. Tell me what I need to do. The final seal lay before them, carved into the floor of a massive stone chamber. Ancient symbols glowed faintly around its edge, pulsing with a dark, almost malevolent energy. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself as Solara guided him to the center of the symbol. You need only speak my name, she whispered, her voice tight with emotion. And then, let go. A shiver ran through him as he prepared to speak, but she interrupted, her hand gripping his arm. Wait. Before you do this, I want you to know that I will carry this debt forever. In the next life, or whatever lies beyond, know that I will search for you. He looked at her, struck by the raw vulnerability in her gaze. I believe you, Solara. Then, with one last glance at her, he whispered, Solara. The ground trembled as he felt a surge of energy race through him, cold and hot at once, tearing through his veins like fire. He clenched his fists, feeling his strength ebb as the curse drank hungrily from his essence. Pain lanced through him, sharper and colder than anything he'd ever felt, as if the life were being siphoned from his very core. Through the haze of agony, he saw Solara watching him, her face etched with both awe and sorrow. And then, as the curse consumed the last of his strength, darkness claimed him. He awoke to silence. The pain had faded, replaced by a strange numbness that blanketed his senses. He blinked, disoriented, struggling to understand where he was. He was no longer in the chamber. Instead, he found himself surrounded by stars, floating in a vast expanse of light. Then, a voice reached him, a familiar, gentle whisper. Ethan. He turned, and there she was, standing before him, no longer bound by the darkness. She glowed with a soft, ethereal light, her features transformed, freed of the curse that had held her captive for so long. Solara, he murmured, his voice barely a breath. She approached him, her eyes filled with a profound sorrow. You saved me, she whispered, her hand reaching out to touch his face, and in doing so, you saved yourself. Confusion twisted within him. What do you mean? The curse, she explained, her voice gentle. It needed a life to break, yes, but it has always been bound to choice. By willingly offering yourself, you didn't lose your life. You transcended it. His mind spun, struggling to grasp her words. Then, am I dead? She shook her head. Not dead, no. You've been freed from the binds of this world. You're in between, caught in a place where the rules no longer hold. Ethan looked down at his hands, marveling at the faint glow that emanated from them. So, what happens now? A small smile touched her lips. Now, we are free to choose. We can stay here, together, in this light. Or, her gaze turned to the distant stars, we can return. Perhaps, in another life, in another form. He considered her words, his heart aching with the weight of all that had transpired. He had saved her, and in doing so, he had discovered something far greater than himself. It was a mystery, a promise, woven into the very fabric of the stars around them. Looking into her eyes, he knew his choice. I want to stay with you, he whispered, the words soft but unbreakable. Solara's face softened, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Then let us be as the stars, forever entwined, bound by the light that has set us free. And together, hand in hand, they drifted into the vastness, leaving behind the shadows and curses of the past, bound only by the promise of a new beginning. The stars closed around them, carrying their story into the infinite, where it would linger whispered by the galaxies for eons to come.